When you're like that, no, would you mind looking at Bruna for me?
Hello.
Hello, Tyler.
Hello. Hi, I'm Bruna Papandrea, film and TV producer, female founder and CEO. And this is Invisible Roadmap, a show about the people who build extraordinary lives without a roadmap. No connections, no shortcuts, just grit, courage and belief. Each week, I sit down with successful people to uncover the decisions, the failures, and the moments that define their lives, and the unpaved paths they took to get there. Marvin.
Yes.
Welcome to Invisible Roadmap.
Thank you very much.
You are one of the people, as you know, you were the first person I asked to be a guest on this podcast.
No, I suspect you say that to everyone.
No, that's so not true.
Okay.
Because I remember distinctly when I heard your story, number one, I remember thinking, oh my God, I've never met anyone whose story in so many ways mirrors mine. And I think I was so surprised by that because unlike me, who doesn't come across as like a blue blood, refined human at all, you do. And you've risen to these amazing heights in your career. And I just remember, it always made me feel so good. When I meet other people who kind of came from a similar background, a little bit like when I meet someone who has lupus and they're high functioning, it just makes me feel so happy. And hearing that story was one of many reasons that I wanted to do this podcast. You are obviously, how I know you is married to my dear friend, Kerry Putnam, who's also incredibly successful, ran the Sundance Institute for years. And you are a really successful entertainment litigator, trial attorney, and have, litigated some pretty massive cases. And that's a world that's always fascinated me. Tell us about little Marvin. Just tell us about where you grew up, where and how you grew up in Maine, and a little bit about your parents and how they came together.
Sure. Well, I'm from Maine. My father's family has been there hundreds and hundreds of years. They've been there since it was Massachusetts. In fact, they were there when it was France. They were there when it was England. So they've been there a long time. My mother's family came illegally over the border from Canada, almost certainly from Scotland.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, her dad, and mom, they were first generation to the States. And they were all very much illegal immigrants, which is important to note because they never voted. My grandmother never had a driver's license, things like that. My dad's family was for like an old Boston family, hence the name Putnam.
I know, it's so
waspy.
royal,
Right,
waspy, yeah.
It is that family, but hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
And so it still has that connotation in New England, but without any of the cash.
Yeah.
And so, on the same piece of property forever, they were really farmers. My grandfather was a cattle, and when I say cattle, I mean dairy farmer, and my grandmom was a teacher on that side. And to me, growing up particularly, they were the kind of rich, educated folk, which means, kind of probably lower middle class or upper lower class, but to me, they were something. And my mom's family was very much not that.
Yeah.
They met because, I don't know how much detail you want. My mom grew up in a place called Woodapitlock, Maine, which was an unincorporated town, which means truly rural.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. My mom she had a one-room schoolhouse where it was, kindergarten through 12. And she always used to joke that she was, summa cum laude, but that's because she was everything. Because she was the other person in her class, right? And, but she was also a big deal because she went all the way through. Many members, if not most.
So she finished high school.
She finished high school.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it was one little room, but there was
No, my mom didn't.
She was very ambitious. She was also very pretty. And I would like to pretend that didn't matter, but it did. It mattered to her.
Yeah.
But I also think
sometimes that was your opportunity.
Exactly. And for her, I think it really was. And back then, being a stewardess, an air hostess was, the height of success, And she applied and she was accepted. And she left for Boston, which was a very big deal. And while she was in this, her father, my grandfather, got very ill.
And she was at Pan Am, right? That was where she was given.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so she had to leave this and go home to take care of her dying father and her mother and raise her younger siblings.
Yeah.
So I think it was not a happy time.
Yeah.
My father, he went off to the military with his brother, was stationed in Germany. he came back and was figuring out what he was going to do. And it was as likely as not he would go to college or something else, because on that side they did. And he was driving truck, which is a very typical kind of northern Maine thing to do. And he was driving truck, and he stopped at a truck stop where my mother was working as a waitress to make money to support her family.
That's like a scene in The Notebook. That's just like, it's like the great American.
It is the great, and I've seen the truck stop. In Mattawamkeag. It is truly like
that doesn't sound like a real place.
I know. Well, none of these places do, and they're very fictitious in the sense that can't be real. And he met her there, and it was a very short and I think not terribly happy marriage.
Yeah.
But I think for both of them, it was a way out.
Yeah.
For her, it was like this was the legitimate way to be able to move on and do something.
Yeah.
And I think for him, he had to be married, and I think she was really other.
Yeah.
She was this kind of very pretty thing that was very different than what he was used to.
That obviously had ambition, but then that just got
stopped in his tracks. And so and I think there was an ambition, and I don't mean that negatively. I think there was an ambition that the marriage held for her too, which I think very quickly fell to the wayside.
And then what happened?
So parents get divorced.
And how many children do they have at this point?
So there are 2 children.
Yeah.
My brother and me.
Yeah.
And I am probably 4 or 5 at this point. He is probably 2.
Yeah.
And they separate, are getting divorced. And my mother ends up getting pregnant. And
so she basically went back in for a little goodbye.
Yes, went for a little goodbye, and so it's a way for my father to be like, you have to come back.
Oh, no.
Back then in that world, that was true.
Yeah.
They got back together for a very brief period of time. She had my sister Mel, and very soon thereafter they were divorced. And then ended up in a world that was really harsh. She was a single mother of 3 children, 1 just born. The youngest, me, is 6.
Yeah.
She ended up getting 2 jobs. She worked during the days as a waitress, and she worked at night at the airport at the ticket counter for a car rental. And for a long period of time, I basically raised, and I was like 6, 7, 8, my brother and sister, to come home from school and take care of them, put them to bed and all of those things. Make them dinner. I was the king of Kraft mac and cheese. I was very good at it.
How far you've come.
I know, exactly. Well, and I can actually remember you could get 4 for $1. Yeah. And that was an important thing.
No, I remember that too. I remember going to college and not being able to afford it. And I was just like ramen noodles and a loaf of white bread, and that would keep me going for like a week.
Depending on the kindness of strangers was a very, very common thing. I wouldn't say my mother was a great mother in what one would consider mothering.
Yeah.
What she was great at is she was a great survivor.
Yeah.
I can look at it as like it was feral. There was no, we learned nothing. There was no oversight. But I don't. For many reasons, not the least of which is she was 24 with 3 kids and had 2 jobs full time.
Yeah, and your father was giving no support at this point.
None. What happened was
Same.
They were incredibly bad at trying to make there be a relationship with the 2 of them for us. They used us very much in their war.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon either.
Oh, no, at all. And back then, I think really common.
Yeah.
But I also think for him, he did not want to be divorced.
Yeah.
This was very much her, like, I want out. Yeah. And his only way of trying to get her back was financial.
Yeah.
When he eventually ended up paying, it was $20 a child a week.
Yeah. Mine did nothing. So no, it's like nothing, and hold on, nothing. And so you're at this point, when you start going to the YMCA, which I've heard you talk about, well, I also love the idea, because for me, that was also where I grew up, the YMCA was a thing. It was like free babysitting, right? It was like, that's where you went because...
Oh, it was free
and they're
babysitting.
kind of amazing organizations.
Oh, no,
actually.
and it's like Big Brothers and Big Sisters is now, and I see that out here.
Yeah.
And so we were there from the minute school ended until it was time to go home and me to make dinner and do everything else. And I am there, and I'm very young. I think I was 7 or 8. I can figure it out. And I get called in by the director of the wire, or at least the daytime director, and he brings me in and says, "Hi, there's some people here who would like to meet you." I don't know shit. I'm like, "Okay, nice to meet you." And it was these 2 people, I remember, and they were there because they were part of a summer camp. And Maine is very famous for its summer camps.
Oh, yeah. My husband went to Jewish summer camp.
Of course, and it's Jewish summer camp.
Yeah.
They're very,
In
it's
Maine.
like, there's this very serious, and they're old school.
Yeah.
They're like, They're like the Ivy League of summers, and they're very expensive for very rich kids. One of the things that they do, and it's a mitzvah, is to give back to the community.
Yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know, a mitzvah is a beautiful Jewish
blessing.
tradition that is a blessing and a give back.
It's doing something to give back that because of how fortunate you are.
Yes.
And for them, the mitzvah was that they would bring 2 kids from Maine, because Maine did not have a very big Jewish population.
Yeah.
So the 2 kids from Maine who needed it into the summer camp for the summer, 8 weeks of summer. And for me, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
Oh my God! So they're not just like, oh, here's your 1 year.
No.
They're like, you're going to come to summer camp every year.
And not just come, but they have uniforms and they have all of those things that you have to wear and all of that. They would get you all of those things. So it was like a full boat scholarship to go to summer camp as like a 7-year-old. And so we went there, and it was mind blowing. You know what I mean? I mean, it showed me a world that I knew nothing of.
Yeah.
I mean, the world I knew was very rural, very northern Maine. And all of a sudden I'm in this world of, true privilege. And kids my own age who are talking about and doing things that is as foreign to me as possible.
Yeah.
And I hated it. I was miserable. I was incredibly out of place.
It's the hardest feeling because you understand the opportunity, but there's so many, there's just where's the, crossover, where do you connect? And I just always felt so, out of place.
And I will tell you something, I don't even know, because I think about these things, in retrospect, I don't even know that I understood the opportunity at the time.
Yeah, of course you didn't.
You know what I mean? You're a kid.
No.
Apparently, I learned years later, my mother called, explained that what was happening and that she had to come get me. And apparently they talked her absolutely out of it. They said, do you understand the opportunity? Do you understand what this could be? Do you understand what will happen?
You stayed.
So I stayed. And it changed, I mean, it of all the things, it changed my world.
So years pass, and then you're seeing and meeting the same kids every year?
So almost, I'm making up the percentage, but I'd say 90% or more are the same kids coming in.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a little bit like a boarding school or something. People come in, and most of them are the kids of people who went. I mean, it's like second, third, fourth generation. And not only do they know each other, but they know each other back at home. They know each other from socially, and even though they were really from all over the world and truly the world, they had a connectiveness for a lot of reasons that was relevant. So I came back every year, and then what happened ultimately was when I was 12. This year, what was also started happening is they were applying to this thing I'd never heard of called boarding school. And they were all doing their things about, am I going to go here? Am I going to go there? My dad went here. They're doing this thing. So I learned about this thing. So at the end of that summer, I went back to Bangor, Maine. I went to my favorite place in the world. And it was my favorite place growing up, which was the library. Yeah. The library was
thank God for libraries.
Can I tell you?
My God.
I could burst into tears.
I know,
now.
I can't.
Life-saving.
I still walk into libraries and go, thank God for libraries.
So do I. And there was a book about, like a Barron's would be today, 100 best boarding schools in America.
And the
ranked,
application
and how you
process.
apply and do this stuff. And I can remember I went, sat, read. I went through the whole thing. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. This is my ticket out of town.
And you're assuming you're going to apply for a scholarship.
Oh, it's better. It's better. I don't even know what that is at first.
Yeah, okay.
So at first I'm reading the stuff. I read that there is a such thing as a scholarship. I read that you can actually check a box on an application that says you can't afford to pay the application fee even. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. What I didn't get in doing this was I didn't get, nobody in my world did this. No one in my world applied to college, let alone a boarding school.
Same.
And so I didn't know this idea of like you apply to ones you can't get into, you apply to ones you might get into, you get ones you will get into.
Hoping that something comes through.
I didn't have an idea of that. So I went through the lists. There was one that was ranked number 1. I thought I was incredibly clever. So I'm like, well, I'll go there.
Yeah,
so it's the only place I applied.
And where was that?
It was Phillips Exeter Academy.
Yep.
And I sent off the application and didn't tell my parents. I then got a letter saying they wanted me to interview and that I needed to come to New Hampshire, another state, for this interview. So I then had to tell my parents. So I did. I don't think they were really moved one way or another. You know what I mean? I don't think they were shocked. I don't think they were thrilled. I just don't think it was like, oh, okay. My father agreed he would take me. We did see my father every Sunday.
Okay.
We go to Exeter. I have to tell this one story from my Aunt Joanne.
Please.
So I had read what you're supposed to wear.
Yeah.
And my aunt has an idea of what you're supposed to wear. And it's not, we did not have clothing. We were not, this was, I used to collect bottles for the 5 cents so that I could save money to buy something.
Same.
So she's like, I'm going to take you and buy you what you need to wear for your interview. And she finds what I think is the most miraculous thing I've ever seen. And it was a 3-piece powder blue polyester. Okay, 3-piece powder blue polyester suit. If you
Please tell me you have a photo.
Oh, I'm sure we do.
Okay.
If you lit a match, bad things would happen. Luckily, we got a matching powder blue shirt and a matching powder blue tie. And at the time, I had a full head of hair, blonder than yours. So I was this baby blue mess with this big blonde thing. And so I drive down in the truck. The other thing happened, I should tell you, is I'd also read, because I was like, what questions did I ask? I was trying, to prepare. And it had said one of the most common questions are, what are you reading?
Yeah.
So I was like, I've got to have something really clever. So I went to Mr. Paperback in downtown Bangor that had a used book section. And I went to the person at the front. I'm like, hi, I have to go do this thing. I explained what it was. And I was like, what would be impressive? Like, what would be impressive but relatable, like not crazy? And he said, there's a guy named George Orwell. He wrote this thing called Animal Farm.
I knew it was going to be like 1984 Animal Farm.
And so you need to read this.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. I remember I paid $0.25, got that. And I read it in the truck all the way to New Hampshire.
Oh, my God.
We got there. My dad parks, and I go in. My dad doesn't go in. That's just not the world.
No. He's dropping you off.
Right. So I go in to this, and I'm at this Ivy League campus, Georgian brick buildings and the whole thing. I walk in, and I sit in the waiting room. I sign in. No one's quite dressed like me, but I'm not sure. I was really wildly delusional.
I'm just picturing John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever at this point.
And that's what it was, because that's exactly the time period.
Yeah.
It was 76.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Exactly.
And so, and I was beautifully delusional. You know what I mean? I really thought I was smart. I really thought I was a catch. So I didn't sit there all trepidatiously. I was waiting for my interview.
Yeah.
I get taken up to the head of admissions, it turned out. So I walk into this incredibly beautiful paneled library room, office, with a big kind of mahogany desk, and there's literally a fireplace burning. And he is sitting there in what I came to understand was the look of prep schools, which was, a Harris tweed jacket and a bow tie and the whole thing. So I do remember being kind of excited. He's asking me questions, I'm answering, and then he asked me this question, which I often think of because of shows how delusional I was. He says, so how did you get here? and because I'm delusional, I don't mean that he means that metaphorically. Like, how did you, of all people, arrive in this place? I think he means literally, how did I get here? And I'm like, my dad in the truck. And he goes, excuse me? I go, with my dad, he's in the truck. He goes, your father's here. He goes, could you go get him? I'm like, sure. Now, in retrospect, and given something else that he said after, and I'll tell you, I realized I don't think he thought I was real.
Yeah.
It was too absurd.
Yeah.
Do you know
You're
what I mean?
he's you're Anna Delvey. You're
Yeah, by the way, yes. Because I was sitting there in this powder blue suit with this big blonde hair, and I was like, here's what I am, and it's backwoods of Maine.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go in the truck and get my dad. And my dad is my dad. He's, in a trucker's outfit, with big oversized blue jeans and, the clip-on suspenders and a flannel shirt and his big boots. And he comes in and sits down. And the guy explains, you understand your son's applying and what it is. And he goes through all of this kind of elaborate what has transpired. And my father's listening, and then he's a real Maine Yankee. And then the guy finishes, he goes, so what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea? And my father, this is all he says, literally all he says. If he thinks so, that was the entire answer.
Oh, my God.
That's
kind of everything,
I know,
by the way.
There was no elaboration. And I think he was waiting for more. And my dad just sat there. He goes, okay, thank you. He then excused my dad. And then he turned to me, and what he said was, he goes, we don't get you. I mean, people like you don't apply here.
Yeah.
You're really an anomaly. And
Yeah.
I remember now, at the time, it didn't seem, all that seemed to me was
Yeah.
like, yeah, of course you don't.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, yeah, you really don't. So ultimately, I got in. They gave me a full boat.
And does that full boat include like accommodation, food, books,
Yeah.
everything?
Everything.
Everything.
What was nice about Exeter, at least, and I think it was true for a lot of those boarding schools, I think a lot of kids at these places were forms of outcasts where they came from.
Yeah.
And I was because of where I lived in different ways. But, they were like the smartest kid in class or the really ambitious girl. Our girl's supposed to be so ambitious. Things of that nature.
Oh, so it wasn't a boy, it was a co-ed.
It was co-ed. And
Yeah.
it had been co-ed for about 4 or 5 years
Right.
by the time I arrived. And I think that made a difference in the type of people.
Yes.
And I know this is a weird thing to say, money didn't seem that important while you were there.
Yeah.
What was important was how smart is that person?
Yeah.
How engaged
Well,
are
I
they?
love hearing
Are they-
that.
So it was actually kind of an amazing thing that I didn't feel super self-conscious. I mean, I certainly was self-conscious enough that I felt like I needed to assimilate and buy certain
Yeah.
things and not talk about where I was from.
Yeah.
But you didn't feel like you were the kid from under the staircase.
So you're at Exeter, and at what point do you start thinking about what you want to do with your life and colleges? Like, what's that process
So
like?
again, I had no role model for that type of thing.
No.
So, but again, people are doing it. And they have an admission process, an admissions office. So you go through the thing.
Yeah.
And
it helps that you're there, right? Because a lot of these places are, what we perceive as like feeder schools, right?
They are
So
feeder.
that is
You don't perceive, they are. Okay. And different prep schools, different boarding schools feed different places.
Yeah.
Like Exeter was famous for feeding Harvard and Princeton.
Yeah.
Andover did Yale. I mean, that's what they had done historically. That's what they were literally created, back in the 1700s to do. And so I'm going through this process. The place I really thought I wanted to go, now remember, this is now late 70s, coming into the early 80s, so it's important to remember this. I wanted to go to Berkeley.
I knew you were going to say that. I almost said it before you said it. I was like, you're going to say Berkeley.
And it was, to me, it was like, West Coast, radical, cool. Yeah. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, like for smart kids, but also, artistic.
So I thought that sounded great. So anyway, I'm looking at these things. Exeter being Exeter, and I think most boarding schools at the time, they tell you where they want you to go.
Yeah.
They don't.
No, they advise you, right?
They advise you heavily, right?
Yeah.
And for someone like me, I'm not one of those kids who's like, we've been going to Princeton for 4 generations. So for me, it wasn't even like, what do you think? It was like, you're going here. And where they really wanted me to go was Princeton. So I go to look at it, and I get there, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. In part because it was Exeter again.
Yeah.
It was exactly the same thing. It was really, really pretty. And I had this idea of like, I want something different. I'm trying to get experience and grow and go. So I was like, I think that Berkeley place. And I can remember on that one of those calls from the basement, I tell my father, which in and of itself is crazy. Well, Dad, I'm in this process of applying for colleges, et cetera. And I think I might want to go to Berkeley in California. Now, I'm sure my dad, the truck driver, all he knows is like radical Berkeley. So my father says, and this is such a funny comment because if you think about everything I've told you, his only response was, "Will be interesting to see how you pay for it." Now, what I think he was saying, what I understood him to be saying is, I won't be helping you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, up until that point, there wasn't lots of help. So it's kind of a funny comment. But I actually took it seriously. And then I went to visit Harvard, and I was like, wow, this is massive.
Pretty nice.
It's nice, but it's in a city. It's really, really big. This is like a bigger thing. So I went. And then they came to interview. They interviewed on campus. You didn't even have to go there to interview.
Oh, my God.
I know. It's a very different world. And I'm in the interview. And again, I have no point of reference. You know what I mean? So I'm in the interview. It's during a weekday in the library at Exeter. And I'm talking about why I want to go and why it's interesting and whatnot. And the interviewer then goes, so you're applying early? And it was said, not even like really a question. It was rhetorical. And I go, no. And he goes, well, everything you said made it sound like you really thought it was perfect for you, and you seemed really well prepared. Why wouldn't you be? And I, in that naivete of not...
So like early decisions.
Like early decisions back then. Back then,
you're
that's what it
definitely
was.
going to take it if you get it.
If you get it, right. Which is this is pre-early decision.
Yeah.
I used to be applying early, and you had this window where you applied there first, way in advance of everything. And if you got in, you went. but you also had to be a really good candidate for
Yeah,
that.
of course.
And so they had told you not to apply early if you weren't. And so they had told me not to apply early. I wasn't the best candidate for them. And so the guy says, you're applying. And I go, no. And he goes, why? And I said, well, I was advised not to. I mean, I was not a person to hide those things, in part because I didn't know I should, right? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, well, the admissions office said that, the college admissions place here at Exeter said that I shouldn't. He goes, and I remember he did it in the most, it was probably one of the most adult encounters I'd ever had. I was 16, but I understood what he was saying without saying it, which I don't think had necessarily ever happened before. And he goes, no, I really think you should.
Oh,
and I was like,
yeah, see, that just that one sentence.
And this was like a Wednesday. It was due by close of post office Saturday. And I had done nothing because I wasn't applying early.
Oh, so you still got to write essays.
So
You got
I got to
still
do all this in the next 3 days. So I went to class all day and then stayed up all night doing these. I finished just in time, mailed it, and weeks later, and it was weeks later, I got accepted.
Oh my God!
And I do.
Do you remember the feeling of getting that?
By the way,
I imagine it was a letter.
I am telling you right now, as I talk to
Chills.
you, I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I ran to my dorm to call. I know I can't call my mother because she'll be at work.
Yeah.
But I called my father. I then later called my mother, and he literally didn't understand. He was just like, "What do you mean?" I go, "I just got into Harvard, and I hadn't told them I was applying there." And he's like, are you sure? And how will you pay? And it was just it was a very, they weren't unhelpful. It was a world, it was like I said, I'm going to Mars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're like, what do you mean? And at that point, I knew what that meant.
Yeah.
Going to Exeter, I didn't understand what it meant, if that makes sense.
At that point, you're like, are you 17 or 18?
16.
16?
I went at 17, yeah.
16?
Yeah.
So, but you went at 17,
went at
which is
17.
still very young, I mean. So
That's only because where I grew up, they didn't have kindergarten.
Right.
It was too
No.
rural.
I mean, I was 17 too.
Yeah.
Just because I just thought we were exceptionally smart. I'm kidding.
But by the way, I want to say something about that. I did too, and I would have done none of these things. I mean, to the extent that what this is about, and we've talked about this a little bit, is what would you take away from something? I used to say, and mean it, that I am successful because I was delusional.
No, totally.
And
well, that's
it
the
matters.
beauty. And I think it's the beauty of, we talk about this when you're young too. It's just like, you're not afraid to take a risk. You don't care as much actually in a strange way. And sometimes that can be liberating. I think.
Incredible. I will also say this about that. When they talk about things in studies that have been done since we were young, they've proven that is actually true. It's why they call it manifesting.
Yeah.
They look at how it changes
That's
brain
exactly
chemistry,
right.
how it changes things in
Yeah,
the room.
that's what manifesting is.
Right, but
exactly.
for us it was just delusion.
Yeah.
But delusion worked for me massively.
Me too. It still does.
By the way, me too.
I work in Hollywood. We're in Harvard now. I'm going to go do a tour just so I can see it.
Right, sure.
We're in Harvard, and tell me what happens.
Carrie, my wife, still my wife.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's weird at this point in time that we're like Ozzie and Harriet. We were never Ozzie and Harriet, but it's weird
you've
that
been together a long
so
time.
long.
Yeah.
40 years. So we meet. We were very good friends. We basically got together every evening to watch Letterman.
Yeah.
Watch Letterman,
Yeah.
and then goodbye. But we became very good friends
Yeah.
over time. She went away junior year. She went back to England. She had been raised here for a bit of time. She went there for junior year. And I suddenly missed her in a way that was not like I just miss a friend. And I truly did not realize it until she was gone. And then when she was gone, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I feel it differently than I understood. I then spent a fair amount of time when she got back trying to show her this without saying it. It was that thing about her friend. Does
You
she
don't
feel
wanna
this way?
yeah.
I don't want to lose
Yeah.
that. But I'm going to be really overt.
We've all seen Felicity.
Exactly. I did everything. I did it's an overheated apartment. There's no air conditioning except for in your room. Can I sleep in there with you?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh! And she's like, what are you doing? She never got it. I finally had to literally come out and be like, hi, let me explain to you what's going on
happening
here.
right now.
So we ultimately got together, blah, blah, blah. So put that aside. So at Harvard, I had no, I had no role model. So even though I'm now in a world where people are doing things, there was nothing aspirational. I had already done my aspiration.
Yeah.
Like, I went to Harvard.
Yeah.
Done. There was no, like, I literally had no, and then after that, I'm going to do X.
Yeah.
I did a couple things in my 20s just because it would be interesting.
Yeah.
I was a photographer's assistant. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's because I didn't know what there was.
No, and I talk about, and I'm exactly the same. And I talk about this all the time. I say sometimes it's good to just expose yourself to as many things, because just like you realized you wanted to be with Kerry, sometimes exposing yourself to those opportunities makes you realize what you do want to do.
Oh, yeah. And can make you understand what you don't want to do.
Exactly.
I was finally reaching the point, Kerry and I were going to get married, and I was kind of having to think about, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right? And I was working at this place, and somebody there that I was doing some work for had gone to law school, and had gone into the Foreign Service, and thought that would be perfect for me.
I always love it when people say Foreign Service, because I'm always just like CIA. Like every time anyone says Foreign Service, I'm like, and they do come to Harvard looking. So
Exactly. And so I ultimately applied to go to law school, really at this person's urging, because I thought I would like to go do something in the international Foreign Service world. I was never going to be a lawyer.
Exciting,
ever.
Yeah.
Went to the law school that he recommended, which was Georgetown, because they had a very famous Foreign Service program. And
God, you went to some crappy schools,
I was at bad
didn't you?
schools. I
I
went to
mean,
bad
geez,
schools.
Exeter, Harvard, Georgetown,
and it was good, but I was not there to be a lawyer. And I, like you, almost dropped out because I hated it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I stayed. And then I clerked for a judge. And I clerked for a judge only because that was kind of what you were supposed to do if you were smart.
That's right.
He was kind of recommending what he thought I should do. And I really was always open to mentors and everything else because I didn't have them, if that makes sense. I didn't have people in my life who otherwise would give. And he was like, I know you think being a lawyer is really beneath you. And he said this. And it was really funny because I never said that, but I did think that. Like nobody cool or interesting or smart is an actual lawyer. You know, you may have the degree, but that's not what you're going to do for life, right? He goes, I know you think that's below you, but I'm going to tell you something. I watched you in this clerkship, and you're really, really good at this in a way that I don't even think you realize. I also have to understand, which is true from law school, that you're probably pretty in debt from law school, and I was.
Yeah.
If I were you, I would go work for a law firm for 2 years, pay off that debt, learn how to be a lawyer, and then take that to the Foreign Service or other things you want, if that's what you decide to do. I actually think you're going to learn that you love it.
Yeah. What great advice, by the way.
And he was totally right.
Yeah.
And I think about, like, he is someone that, his name is the Right Honorable Roger B. Anderwelt on the Federal Circuit.
It also
in
sounds
DC.
like it's from a movie.
Yeah, I know. And he was a very famous judge in D.C. And were he alive today, he died very sadly and very young. He's someone I would reach out and thank because he really changed the trajectory of what I do. So that's how I ended up doing what I do.
So at this point, are you married?
We got married just before law school. And you will love this because typical Kerry. So we get married.
Yeah. But you're young. You're like 23?
She's 23. I'm 24.
Wow.
She quits her job. I quit my job. I'm going to go to law school. She's going to move to D.C. with me. We go off on a honeymoon with no money, but we also have no responsibility. So it was fabulous for a long time. Come back, go to Georgetown. I think Kerry lasted 9 months. She was like, I need to get back to entertainment and the world I live in. So she ended up moving back to New York and going to HBO. And so I stayed for 2 years without her there, but we basically just commuted back and forth.
Well, that's amazing, by the way.
You know, we joke about the idea that we've been together forever because we've spent half of it apart.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think that if you're a person who has an incredible drive in a career, regardless of the type of career, you have to be with a person who either has a similar drive or is a caretaker who wants to take care of you.
Yeah.
I think it's
you just have to want the best for each other, whatever that is, I think.
And really support that.
And support that, exactly.
Yeah. And not be jealous of that.
No,
you watch,
that was the second thing I was about to say.
It's particularly interesting to watch with successful women.
Yeah.
Men with successful women can have a bigger issue with it than the converse.
Yeah.
And you watch that start to play out, and particularly if your trajectory changes.
Yeah.
So that the man was more successful initially, but now the woman is. And you watch that play out and you think to yourself, how dumb. Why aren't you, like, I considered Carrie's successes my successes.
Yeah.
I think but for me,
Yeah,
they would not
agree.
have occurred.
Yeah.
And I think that she feels the same
Yeah.
of mine. But I think you have to really feel that.
Yeah,
way.
I
Anyway.
totally agree with that. So you're in New York, and I think it's my understanding that you're a lawyer on Wall Street. That was in the investment banking world.
Is
that how you start?
It's in the investment banking world, and it was a very famous firm that had like started junk bonds and did Milken and a really great.
Bernie Madoff.
Wall
I'm
Street-
kidding.
By the way, you laugh. Yes, that type of firm. And what ended up happening was, but what they also had was a very famous First Amendment free speech practice.
Wow.
For what was then traditional media, New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, Wall Street Journal, all the major 60 Minutes, all those type of things. And it was kind of, I would argue in some days it was kind of the height of First Amendment protections. And that really interested me.
And we're back. I'm kidding.
By the way, you laugh. And so I wanted to work in that, but you also had to kind of be selected within the firm to do it.
Yeah.
And I was not. And they had a very famous lawyer, who's still a very famous lawyer, probably the most famous First Amendment lawyer of all time, named Floyd Abrams.
Yeah.
And Floyd ran this very famous First Amendment practice, and a lot of people went there to work for Floyd.
Yeah.
But that did not mean you did. You had to get that gig. And I spent a year and a half, and I'm not exaggerating, this is true. I spent a year and a half where every day for a year and a half, I would go to his office and I would sit outside and wait until he came or left. So I could say, hi, remember me?
Yeah.
And I kept doing this. I don't think he could have given a shit because I was one of many who did that and there was no reason why. And then I got very lucky that there was a woman who was about to do something for the New York Times, and you weren't here then, so you may not have ever heard of her. Her name was Kitty McKinnon. And she was this famous feminist speech person who had some really crazy, in my opinion, out there views on what should and shouldn't be protected. And I went to things like hate speech and shouldn't be protected and things of that nature. And Floyd was going to have a debate with her in the New York Times. It was going to be a public debate, but then it would be printed in the Times. And at the last minute, it was like over a weekend, a person who was working on this got sick. And so it was a weekend, he desperately needed help for someone.
Where's that guy who's been sitting outside the office?
And so I got asked to do it, and I went in. I don't think I left for 48 hours. Did everything I could to come up with something impressive.
Yeah.
Met with him and others for several times. He did it. He was pleased. And then I worked for him from then on. And that's how I started doing all the First Amendment stuff I wanted to do, et cetera. Which shows, and the thing we've talked about, if you want something, you just don't take no.
No, and it is like, I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to, and I'm a bit like that. I've often put myself in a plane like, if you were here, I'd meet with you. Well, I'm going to be there tomorrow.
I'll be there tomorrow. I, particularly in the last generation, maybe two, have watched a difference in the type of some of the people. There's a much more sense of entitlement and
I hadn't noticed.
What, you want me to work on Saturday?
Yeah.
Or things of that nature? Or you're telling me this at 7
My
o'clock
mental
on
health
Friday?
can't take that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes because of that, someone would say to me, don't you ever get upset? Don't you ever?
Yeah.
It doesn't make you sad. And I'm like, are you crazy? And they're like, I go, my mother was a waitress and worked 2 jobs. My dad was a truck driver.
Yeah.
I don't work as many hours as they worked in a week when I work 7 days a week. And I make exponentially more money than they ever dreamed of. I remember my first big bonus. I can remember calling my father because even I was like,
it's a big deal.
The figure was just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
And I can remember how proud I was, pathetic, how proud I was to call and tell my dad.
It's important, I
and
get
my
it.
dad said, what?
Yeah.
And I said, Dad, I have a check. I'm literally looking at it for this figure. And he goes, I don't think I've made that in my lifetime.
Yeah. Maybe we are spoiled, but I love my job. So I never feel like I've worked a day in my life. I mean, I say that it's a real thing.
But I have a question, and this is an honest question. I feel the same. But I also think this, and this is maybe not a healthy thing. I don't think I ever disliked a job. In other words, I worked at the mall and I liked it. I painted houses and I liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, like I liked working and I could find something thrilling and interesting and a need to succeed.
Yeah.
it's important to be good at something because you like it, and if you work hard, it's very, it's circular, certainly. But I have no idea if this is what I was meant to do. I can tell you, I can think of many things that I think probably better at and maybe would have loved more.
Yeah.
But I don't say that with regret.
No.
I say it more with a sense of, I don't think you need to find your passion to be passionate about what you do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think you can have a passion for living.
Yeah.
And for working and talking.
Well, no, it's not the only thing, right? It's like our life is a much bigger thing. But tell me about
Can I ask you a question, though?
Yeah.
Is it for you?
What?
Just what you just said. Is it, and I mean this honestly.
Yeah.
Is life a bigger thing than working? And let me be clear what I mean by that.
Yeah.
There's no way you do what you do, and I've watched you. You're on a plane, I watched you. I similarly, I can remember for the Michael Jackson trial, I moved into a hotel in downtown LA, so 6 miles from my house. I saw my kids twice.
Yeah.
You make sacrifices or do things because you think you need to.
Yeah.
But I don't regret that.
No.
Nor do I think it's bad for them.
No.
But I think some people would say that's not life. I think it is.
I agree. I have been that person like you. I mean, I remember shooting that finale of Big Little Lies, and I got a hotel room in downtown LA, 12 night shoots, and I saw my babies were little. I saw them like twice the whole time. Exactly. That was my version of a trial. But I knew my husband was there, right? So, and Ida Fisher said this to me once. She's like, it's okay if it's not you. It just has to be one of you. Right. That is the consistent. Now, my husband's been the consistent parent. And I think it gets harder as your kids get a little older. My son's barely speaking to me right now because I've left and I'm in Los Angeles doing this podcast.
But I do think this about that, just so you know, in the arc of it with kids.
Yeah.
So our kids definitely had those times. Probably about the same age as yours.
Yeah.
Where there was anger, there were all kinds of things that you weren't the mom coming with cookies.
Yeah.
You weren't the one that was doing X or Y or Z. Lucy, I can remember being very upset that I couldn't go to the father-daughter tea that they had.
That's a big deal.
And it's a big deal. However, on the other side of it, I think both of them, how they look at working, I actually think particularly how they look at women who work is very informed by what they were not happy about in a period, but in the long arc of it is actually the best thing possible. I think.
Totally. And it's something we talk about a lot. Okay, so talk to me. You mentioned the Michael Jackson trial, and I know that was a really pivotal turning point, I think, in terms of your kind of notoriety in your field.
Notoriety is a good
Can
way
you
to put it,
talk a little bit about that? Because it's kind of an amazing case that you won.
Prior to it, I'd had several large cases that had a lot of public scrutiny. I'd done Enron, I'd done Exxon Valdez.
Wow.
I did the Holocaust banking cases back when there was all of that. So, and don't get me wrong, other people did them too. I wasn't the lead lawyer.
You're part of a team,
But I'd seen that kind of scrutiny. And in fact, when I got the call to do the Michael Jackson case, literally what the person calling, who's the general counsel of the company, called and said to me.
And the company you were was AEG.
It was AEG.
Yeah.
But AEG, the parent company, and it's actually the Anschutz company, the general counsel of it called me. And what he said in the first call, and I'll never forget it, was he goes, we believe there's going to be a law school. There wasn't one yet.
Yeah.
And we need to hire you because you're really good at the high-low of a trial. And I go, excuse me? And he goes, well, when a trial is a 3-ring circus, that's what he said, you understand all 3 rings. You know what to do in court, you know what to do in public, in the press, and you know what to do actually substantively for appeal.
Yeah.
And what he was saying particularly at the time was that was before people tried things in the press the way they do now.
Yeah.
This was kind of the time where that was changing.
Yeah.
Because it used to be, if it happens in a courtroom, you don't talk about it outside, you don't talk about it on the steps. This idea of people running out and holding a press conference didn't really happen yet. But they wanted that and knew it would be important. So it became really pivotal because even though that's why I was hired, and even though one should know, the wrongful death of Michael Jackson, which became a 7-month trial, 6 months in court, and then an additional month for jury selection. every day.
6 months in court.
6 months in court and a month prior selecting a jury in court. So 6 months of witnesses and a jury, 6 months. There was no way to prepare, even mentally, for what a show that was.
Yeah.
It was called the trial of the century. It was as the Lindbergh trial had been before.
Yeah.
It was, literally, I would have thousands of press hits a day around the world. Because they would send these things to me, and he was such a public figure.
Yeah.
It was such a public thing. I don't think there's a person you could ask who couldn't tell you where they were when they heard Michael Jackson die.
Yeah.
It was one of those things
100%.
And so it became much bigger. It ended up, we had to get police protection. We ended up having to bring in the FBI. There were a lot of death threats. They literally had planes with banners denouncing me flying over the house.
Wow.
People would spit on me as I would enter the courthouse. I don't know.
That's sweet.
There were all these conspiracy theories online. There was one about me and Carrie, really funny. We had killed him together.
Yeah.
She did it so she could make a movie for, I think it was for HBO.
Right.
So it becomes this massive
Wow.
thing that even though you know it's going to be big, you're not prepared
No.
for. But as you know, field you do, you have to deal with all that and do that because that's part of the gig.
Yeah.
But you can't lose sight of the gig.
No.
You know what I mean? Because
That's right.
they're different things.
Yeah. So you win that trial.
I did. Thank God.
And then does that change your career? Are you a partner at this point? Yeah.
Yes, I am a partner at this point. What changed? There are things that change and things that don't change. During the trial and for a while afterwards, I would literally walk into LAX and everybody at the bar, like a bunch of people would say something. Because, it was televised. It was all these things. So that kind of thing happens. That doesn't have to do with getting work. That has to do with just weird
gaining
stuff.
notoriety.
Right.
Yeah.
The LA Times wrote this story apropos of this, really funny. The LA Times wrote a front page piece about me and the other lawyer in the Michael Jackson case. And it was one of those pieces where they want you to be, Cain and Abel, or however you want to put it, David and Goliath, whatever it is, whatever combo you want for that. Well, the archetype that they put me in was a little bit like where we started this conversation. I was the blue-blooded, they literally said, born with a silver spoon in my mouth.
Oh, yeah, cool. This is the best part of this whole interview, by the way.
Okay.
Because that's how far we have come.
Right. So I'm now like that. And the person on the other side was painted as this scrappy. The reality was, I grew up in the backwoods of Maine.
Yeah.
He grew up rich in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
What changed was some people then would be like, hi, I was told to call you about this. I was worried about doing so because I know that you're this like celebrity lawyer. Do you know what I mean? So suddenly I was a celebrity lawyer and they're like, I'm not a celebrity lawyer. I represent everybody. So that changed.
Yeah.
But the actual work, what actually changes also? Actually, how the judge deals with you a little bit.
Wow.
That has changed a little bit because they actually know who I am.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, they do. And I'm sure they've seen you do your work and have respect. And I'm still kind of recovering from they see you as the blue blood guy. This is the best part. So
can I tell you something about that?
Yes.
This was really at the beginning of there being at all an online presence for newspapers.
Yeah.
So that the internet wasn't what it was now.
Yeah.
Okay, and the idea of a paper having, so the LA Times write this front page and it's a big deal.
Yeah, thank God. Can you imagine that now, by the way?
Well,
your kids would have to get security.
Well, by the way, my kids did have to. Because they were threatened.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the reasons they went to a school they went to was because it had grounds and security because there were threats that happened.
Yeah.
One of my friends wrote actually to the LA Times online when the piece came out, said, do you actually do reporting? Because if you did reporting, you would know he's the opposite of Silver Spoon. And then went through a whole, which is one of the only things that are ever out there. Anyway.
I've often thought that many times myself. So now you're at Latham and Watkins. You're at Latham and Watkins. And you don't have to talk about what you're working on, but what gives you what kind of gets you up in the morning now? Are there things you still you want to do in this field of work?
Sure.
Do you imagine yourself, you said it before, but doing something different?
Sure. Both are true, yes.
Yes.
So with the first, with one exception, I won't say what it was, I was quite young. I've never done a case that I didn't want to do. And a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I haven't. And in fact, when I was coming up for partner, there was a very important case that was happening. And the partners came in and said, several of them, including the head of my department, came and said, hi, there's this very important, very big deal case, and you'll be up. We really want you to do it. We think you'd be great at it, but also it will help you make it. And I said no to it because it was something I really strongly didn't agree with.
Yeah.
Now, I want to note something. I represented Exxon and Exxon Valdez. I represented the banks and the Holocaust Bank.
Yeah.
I am hardly somebody sitting here on this, but I thought that they were in the right because my sweet spot, what
but
I'm
you
good
also
at,
believe in the law. I mean,
exactly.
obviously.
And that's what I was going to say. What I'm really lucky in that what I became known for, this goes to you're like, did Michael Jackson change things?
Yeah.
I was already known as the following, and this is what I am known for. I am hired because you're expected to lose, but you shouldn't.
Yeah.
There are people who are hired because they did it, and there are people who are good at that, the person who did it. There are people who are hired for the ones that you clearly didn't. I'm the one where they think you did it, but you actually didn't.
Yeah.
That's my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a problem doing that kind of thing, but I don't really love doing it for something that I think is really wrong and amoral.
Yeah.
I've largely never had to do that.
Yeah.
Almost everything that I'm proudest of professionally, you don't know about and the world doesn't know about.
Yeah.
If I'm really good at what I do, it never gets there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm clever enough to figure out a path so that nobody ever hears about it.
Yeah.
And those still make me really happy. And it's not about the biggest case, the most famous. It's just, you know what it is? I look at my family and I think about how inaccessible the law was for them and recourse. And so to be able to give someone recourse and to give them like access to something without making it seem so inaccessible or highfalutin or beyond their reach is really pleasing, which gets to the second part. Is there something other than what I'm doing that I would do? Yes. There is a part of me that is exploring, and by that I mean in my head, what's next. Because listen, I've made more money than I ever thought possible.
Yeah.
I don't need, my kids are old enough that they don't. So what is it that I could do for a next chapter that would make me really pleased, but also provide something? And so I've been thinking about that. Partially, there are things like doing things in the First Amendment realm, particularly because of the speech issues and what's going on in this country right now, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that's looking into, I mean, I do think that what has happened with a lot of lawyers and whatnot vis-a-vis Trump is really terrifying. And it's not the law that I went into.
Yeah.
And so there's, there are firms that have started of really amazing lawyers who've come together simply to ensure the state of law in this country in an administration like this. So there is I'm definitely thinking of those things.
Yeah. Can I just stop you? Because one of the things that, one of the things I'm passionate about is because I am always like, oh my God, how did I get here? And how did I get the access? Because as you have experienced firsthand, those access points changed the course of your life. What have you done and how do you support that access for people now in your life? Because I know that's something that you're very passionate about.
Taking it backwards, how I provide access to others. I entered a profession that was largely dominated by white privileged men.
Yeah.
Daddy had been a judge, granddaddy had been, a name partner. That was largely true, not completely true.
Yeah.
But it was very much a certain privileged profession. But what I also did and have always done is try to ensure that I had teams that were not all that.
Yeah.
And I've done it for two reasons. One is I do not believe that you can be successful in front of a jury with a bunch of white men.
Yeah.
You have to have a diverse team for a diverse group of people for lots of reasons, not the least of which is so you have different diverse points of view, so you're presenting different diverse arguments as to why you're right, not one argument. I also think a jury wants to see themselves.
Yeah.
But I also did it because I think it's important to give back in that way. And while I passed, I was not a rich kid from that world. And I therefore wanted to give access to people who also weren't.
Yeah.
And I started particularly early on. I remember I had a bunch of partners at a firm come to see me at a case, and when I was asking why they were there, I was expecting, it was like, "'Cause I hear you're great on cross-examination," or "The way you are in court is something everyone should see." And what they said to me, which actually ultimately was more gratifying, was, "I hear you're one of the only people at your level who actually has teams that can be all women." And in fact, that one they came to see, my whole team was women.
Yeah.
I've always done that, partially to give back, because I felt that, but also because I think they were the most talented people.
It's the best business.
And they had something to prove.
Yeah.
To the extent I have any legacy after I'm gone from this field or otherwise, it's not going to be a Wikipedia entry about the famous cases, et cetera. I think it will be that the people that I brought along who are now partners and famous and able are people who didn't traditionally have access to law in the same way.
That's everything. I mean, I think that's everything, right? I don't think there's a better legacy.
I don't either.
If you said to me, what's your most, important thing? It's like, how do we give, it's not about, for me, it's always been about socio-economic diversity more than it has.
Me too, traditionally.
That's just because that's my experience.
But can I tell you something about that? So that's the thing, when you say about doing something else, the one thing I've been thinking about lately is, and now you've been to Maine, so you see what it's like.
Yeah.
Rural poverty is a very different thing.
Yeah.
And I actually believe a lot of things going on with Trump and everything in our politics the last 10 years, look at the J.D. Vance of it all, et cetera, there is this incredible rural poverty thing in America historically that is only getting wider and wider and more disenfranchised.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
And I come from that.
Yeah.
And so the one thing I have thought a lot about is going back to it, so that as opposed to, not that these aren't important to me, but as opposed to doing something for, poor kids in LA, not that that's not important and not that I don't do it, but if I could go back to where I'm from and do that, to me, that would be a very big deal.
Yeah, I think about that as well. Yeah.
But you do that.
I mean, I always laugh because I've moved countries multiple times, and every time I move anywhere, I'm like, oh, I'm going to hide that part of myself, and I get to reset the clock, because I think, identity. Number one, I don't think you can ever really escape who you are, and I've spent my life making films about identity, and that is a subject that's really important to me. But I do think there is this idea, and people talk about imposter syndrome all the time, and I don't actually feel like an imposter in that sense, because I know I'm better than anyone else doing it. So I don't feel like that. But what I have always felt is like, oh my God, if you heard what I used to sound like, and we'll play some videos at some point. You wouldn't know.
Dawn, I can assure you I can beat you on that one. If you saw the accent that I came out of there with and how I talk today, they're different things.
Who are we?
Well, so I'm going to say something about that. Like you, I think for lots of reasons, not the least of which is how we looked. I know I knew you.
Well, I kind of look the same, by the way, just with a perm.
By the way, that's not true. We were younger and better looking.
Oh yeah, that. Speak for yourself.
But what I mean by that is we did pass.
Yes.
And we could pass.
Yeah.
And I look back, listen, I lied. I pretended I was things I wasn't.
Yeah.
If someone was going to presume I was that Putnam, I was.
Yeah. I just stopped giving so much information.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And then at first, initially there was a lot of lying. Then there was a omission.
Yeah.
Nothing made you kind of more interesting, or nothing more made it clear that you were that than the fact you didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
That also became very helpful as a lawyer, because then I wasn't giving you any materials that you could come against me with personally. So, and now I do none of that. However, what I think about is that a product of success? In other words, it's easy to be truly authentically me.
Yes.
Because I succeeded.
Yeah.
I wonder if I would be truly authentically me had I not.
Yeah. And it's not that I don't. I care deeply about what people I love and care about and respect think. But for the most part, I think you're never gonna be all things to all people. People don't see.
You don't want to be.
The complexity of an issue. We live in this, culture of kind of clickbait. And at some point, I just think you have to know who you are. People talk about it all the time, and I love this, give yourself grace, give other people grace, and just do the best that you can.
So I often think about that idea of a certain pride, a certain whatever you want, that I'm so authentically me, and I really am so authentically me. I think you know that.
We're so us that it's alarming.
Exactly, and to some people it is, as we
It's
both
just
know.
too much for most people.
But I also do think, that would I be were I not successful? I do think about that because I'd like to think I would be, but who knows? I do think age and everything matters.
Yeah.
But what I'll also say is this. Sometimes, I think of Viola Davis, and I've seen interviews where she talks about growing up, how she grew up.
Yeah, and not only, it's so funny you say that, I don't want to interrupt you,
please.
but one of my life-changing moments was I was at some Women in Film thing and she spoke. And when she spoke about how she grew up,
I was there.
It was like life-changing moment for me.
So that's so funny. And this again goes to you and I being from a very similar place. So I was there. It's what I'm talking about, literally what I was just addressing. And what's interesting about saying, even here, I grew up really poor and now, so those are empty words because they're not talking about the actual experience.
Yeah.
And like when she talked about the actual experience, and
being hungry,
or literally having kids mock you mercilessly because of how you look and dress. I think that lying, all kinds of things, there was shame, there was all the things that you shouldn't have, God knows, but that you grow up with that results in why you're doing what you're doing. And it's funny, I know that I'm a much truer, more honest version of myself today. But one, I think that's because of success, which makes it easy. But I also think because you're always rewriting your own narrative, that's my present narrative.
Okay, so I always ask everyone 2 questions at the end, which is
I don't know what they are, which is a good thing.
Well, yeah, it's gonna be easy for you. So what would you tell your 18-year-old self? Or in your case, let's say your 17-year-old self.
Right,
because for you and I, that was the time when we had to decide what life was gonna be.
So now I could get emotional. I had major dreams. You know what I mean? Like I wanted so much.
Yeah.
And my life has exceeded those dreams so many-fold.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I would hate to think I did anything, said anything to that 17-year-old that would change the hunger, the desire, the fear, and we talked about the idea that if you have nothing to lose, you'll do anything.
That's right. That's the best superpower we can have. The greatest superpower.
And I would argue that today, because I have so much further to fall, I'm not as brave as I maybe was then, because then I would do anything. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Right? So I actually don't think I would tell them anything.
It's a great answer.
Or if I did, it'd be something.
I just said drink less and take less
drugs. That's what I was about to say.
mean.
What I see, even that I wouldn't say. What I would say, so something like that, which is really funny, because where I come to then is where I was like, take care of your health, it doesn't last.
Yeah.
That's probably, I mean, it's the most boring answer.
No, but it's a great answer, actually. I think that's a great answer. And then the second question is, and because this is such and there does not have to be one person. Was there a person or a moment in time that really changed your life, that you felt like changed your life?
I mean, obviously the stuff that we've talked about, which is like
the judge,
the judge doing this. More than that, more than anything, the person who got me to go to the summer camp that showed me a world at 7 that I didn't know.
Was it Kennebec, right?
Kennebec, yeah. What I do think that that illustrates, and I think it's really important. I actually think this idea of like any person. I could give you like the judge or Floyd Abrams. I can give you several really famous people who did something amazing for me.
Yeah.
And by the way, the guy I talked about going to law school, it was Secretary of State Vance. You know what I mean? These are like major people, right? And that makes for really good copy. You know what I mean? Really good clickbait. Yeah. You know, you say this famous person, I could give you a great Matthew McConaughey thing that he did for me once when I was 35 that I'll never forget. And when I realized what a true, and I mean this genius he is.
Yeah.
But actually, in life, almost every person who's had impact, major impact, good and bad, is not a notable personage. You know, it's not someone famous, nor is it like my fourth grade teacher, you know, type of thing. It's small moments. And the reason that's so important, I really think this all the time, and you and I are very similar this way. We're very optimistic.
Yeah.
We always see everything like a glass half full, always, which I think matters. But in that vein, I really do think your life It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Which is if you didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like what happens. And then you look back at all the massive impact that you didn't know you had on people. I think that is both true, but also something you should be unbelievably mindful of at all times.
Yeah.
Because small things.
Yeah, it is
can
the
change
small acts
worlds.
of kindness.
So.
And it's I love that answer because I remember you just made me think of, I had this beautiful assistant, the best assistant I've ever had, Emily Pentor, and she's from an El Salvadorian family. And I wanted to come out to Australia. And I was like, come out to Australia, I need your help. And she was there so long, I was like, why didn't we bring your mum and your aunt out? Because she had El Salvadorian cousins who live in Melbourne that she reconnected with because of that. And, oh my God, it makes me want to cry telling the story. And she brings me a card and a dish of this incredible chicken that her mother made me. And she wrote me this note and she was like, I don't have any other way to thank you except with how I know to put love into the world. And she made me the dish of her birth. And it was the most delicious thing I'd ever eaten. And part of that was because of that note. You know, but it's like, you don't have to have resources to like give those acts of kindness. It's like that to me is like kindness. And those reminders, we cannot get enough.
You cannot. And I think today, we're in a world where that's really changing. It's become okay to be bad to people and cool, and the discourse has become so horrible, really disrespectful, in a way that I think really diminishes everyone.
That's right.
And I think you just should be kind always. And I don't mean that in an insipid way.
No.
I think the impact is big.
Well, on that note, thank you, Marvin Putnam.
Always.
You not blue blood,
not even
brilliant person. Thank you.
You've been called this by others, I know, but I think in this instance that I've often felt this way. You are like my sister from another mother, so it's nice to sit here with you.
And you, my brother. Thank you.
Love you, dear.